people all over the world are frightened of the future. A new and strange civilization is breaking over us like a giant wave. For some, the future holds great promise. For others, great problems. For all of us, uncertainty and the feeling that we're being swept into the unknown.
Long ago, a first wave of change settled our ancestors on the land. Then a second wave of change gave us machines and mass society. Hurling us into the future. We are now caught up in the third and greatest wave of change in human history. Millions of years, human beings live on an untamed planet. 10,000 years ago, some genius reached out and altered our lives forever. By planting a seed, that hand launched the first wave of change to surge across the earth. Everywhere, it turned nomads and hunters into peasants and farmers. "300 years ago, like a hammer blow in history, the Industrial Revolution spread a new civilization from Europe outward. This was the second great wave of change in human history. Today, 1 billion people, from Western Europe to the Soviet Union, from Japan to the United States, form a single worldwide industrial society, a civilization of the second wave. A third gigantic wave of change has been unleashed across the planet. Our machines are evolving at a blinding rate. We too are changing. These changes seem random, unconnected, some even familiar. Yet this is only an illusion, for taken together, they form a dramatic pattern. We are creating a new civilization. And killing an old one. This isn't the first time an old civilization has faced overwhelming change.
One of the deepest mysteries of the past is posed by these ancient Mayan ruins that dot the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. The Mayans were a first-wave civilization. They worked the land. They built a brilliant society. They knew mathematics, astronomy, writing. They created a complex religion of their own. And yet, this highly advanced civilization disintegrated, and nobody quite knows why. There are moments these days when it is all too easy to imagine the end of our own second-wave civilization. But if we were archaeologists of the future, if tomorrow we stood on the ruins of today's great industrial civilization, what objects might we find? What might our world leave behind? Things like this, for example, a pin, a watch, and a gun. If tomorrow's archaeologists found objects like these, what conclusions would they reach about our own vanished civilization? Every civilization has a code, a hidden blueprint according to which its people live. By studying the artifacts we leave behind, we can crack the code of our own civilization. Take that quintessential object of the industrial age, the gun. The gun was one of the first things to be manufactured out of interchangeable, standardized parts. Take one apart, and the parts fit perfectly into another of the same type. What did this mean? It meant that we'd taken the first step on the road to uniformity, and not just in guns.
The second wave of change not only standardized products, it molded us to fit into a mass society. A world of repetitive work, of identical products and images, of skyscrapers, factories, and commuters. Standardization became a way of life. Another principle of industrial life. Millions of people sharing a common rhythm. And if some archaeologist of tomorrow found a watch, it would tell a lot about what makes us tick. For the watch maintains the rhythm of 9 to 5. All mass societies are not only standardized, they are synchronized.
As being delayed for 2.5 hours.
Yet everyone hates the 9 to 5.
Quick! March!
Lindsay McDonald won the bronze medal for the 400-meter relay at the Moscow Olympics when she was just 16. She is from Fife, Scotland, and today she's being honored by the local government. She's being awarded the ceremonial pin. As with any medal, the eye is drawn immediately to the design, to the symbol on its face, seldom to the pin behind it. Yet the pin has a story of its own, and this story too begins in Scotland. Not far from here, 200 years ago, an event occurred that has echoed down through the years. In a small town called Kirkcaldy, a professor of moral philosophy, Adam Smith, completed one of the classic books of our time. He began it with a discussion of, yes, the pin. For like the gun and the clock, the pin tells a lot about the civilization that produced it.
This is the garden in Kirkcaldy, where Smith no doubt conceived many of the ideas which later appeared in his epical work. The Wealth of Nations, of which this is a first edition, begins with a famous passage. In it he says, "The greatest improvements in the productive powers of labor seem to have been the effects of the division of labor." And the example he gave was that of the pin. "The important business of making a pin," he wrote, "is divided into about 18 distinct operations. By dividing the task among many workers," Smith said, "greater productivity could be achieved." Adam Smith used the pin to reveal another aspect of the hidden code of industrial society: specialization, or the division of labor. From pin making to pediatrics, from auto assembly to education, the idea of breaking jobs down into specialties became another central principle of all the industrial societies.
Don't wait for it. Come to it. Come on. Come on. Dig it out. Come on. Come on, Stryker.
These boys don't know it, but they're actually learning Adam Smith's principle of the division of labor. Every player a specialist. Combine the specialists and you have a team, on the sports field or on the assembly line. In a mass society, the team is more important than the individual. The basic code of mass society ran through every aspect of life. This popular amusement park in Vienna, for example, is a place where people come to enjoy themselves, to get away from the factory and the office, to bring their children on a Sunday afternoon.
But Potter Park is special. It boasts the world's biggest Ferris wheel. And big is what second wave civilization was all about.
From the earliest days of the industrial era, all of us were inculcated with the idea that heroic scale, sheer size, had something to do with virtue. The French rushed out and built the Eiffel Tower. The Americans, the Empire State Building. The British, the Queen Mary, and then the Queen Elizabeth. And the Soviets, well, there's a story about Stalin that he used to call in his experts and say to them, "What's the biggest steel mill in the world? Build me a bigger one. What's the biggest hydroelectric dam in the world? I want a bigger one." Just as second wave civilization standardized, specialized, and synchronized our lives, it also taught us that bigger is better. In nickel mines and in nightclubs, in factories and in Ferris wheels. Today, however, millions are no longer convinced that biggest is best. Hand in hand with the idea of bigness came another basic principle. Alexander Hamilton, in the American colonies, called for the centralization of political power. He wanted a strong central government for the United States. Later, at this very desk, in the reading room of the library of the British Museum in London, a German emigre named Karl Marx called for the decisive centralization of power in the hands of the state. In capitalist as well as communist industrial nations, power flowed to the center. The power of the state, the power of money. This concentration of power was paralleled by the concentration of energy, the concentration of production, and even the concentration of people. Factories clustered together. Whole cities sprang up. Vast populations were concentrated in crowded urban areas. All this added up to nothing less than a mass society built around the machine. Even the arts were shaped by it. Before the age of the machine, concert music was performed for princes and patrons, by quartets and quintets, by small chamber groups. As the second wave arrived, however, the first concert halls began to crop up in Vienna, in Paris, London, and Tokyo, and eventually in cities everywhere. With them came the impresario, the businessman who financed concerts and sold tickets. The more seats he added, the more tickets he could sell. But the bigger concert halls needed louder sound, and therefore more musicians. The small chamber group grew into the full orchestra. The players all dressed in standard attire. They were divided into specialized departments, each with its section leader. The conductor, with his baton, maintained central control and synchronized the sound. And so it was that the second wave got its music factory. Yet mass society was not just smokestacks and assembly lines. It was a rich, many-sided social system that affected every aspect of our daily lives. It put the great Willow Run factory outside Detroit, but it also put the tractor on the farm, the typewriter in the office, the refrigerator in the kitchen. It gave us the daily newspaper, the cinema, subways and DC-3s. It gave us corporations and cubism. It gave us Bauhaus buildings and Barcelona chairs and sit-down strikes and vitamin pills and longer life, and it also universalized the ballot box. More important, it linked all these things together, assembled them like a machine, and produced the most powerful, cohesive, and expansive civilization the world had ever known.
Today, that mass society is in trouble. From one end of the earth to the other, the industrial world moves from crisis to crisis. Powerful pressures are tearing at it. Pollution, unemployment, technological upheaval.
most basic systems of second-wave society are now threatened. The global economy, increasingly unstable. Urban systems rotting, riddled with decay. Social tensions rise in nation after nation. Some insist the world itself is approaching Armageddon. As the second wave crashes around us, a third wave of change gathers force, carrying us toward a surprising future. In an embryo, we see only beginnings. In society today, the same holds true, for a third wave of change is taking shape. Its potential is enormous, different from anything we've known before. It will affect every human being on the planet, for it brings with it a unique gift. New choices for the individual. This new wave is surging all around us. It is symbolized by today's daring individual sports, but it also runs deeper. In every field, individual expression is shattering the uniformity of the second wave mass society. And not just in North America. The impact of the third wave can be seen in Japan. Take Toshio Eguchi's lifestyle. He plays golf 4 days a week because he's discovered something new. Rent a robot. For approximately what it would cost to rent a car, Eguchi leases a robot that turns out parts for toy watches. It can work for him 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. The robot works. Eguchi plays. Kiyuki Shiga and his wife own a tiny farm in Fukushima. They raise silkworms, a kind of farming that has been practiced in Japan for over 1,000 years. Silkworms are fed mulberry leaves, and harvesting the bushes is a regular task on the Shiga's farm. Nothing could be more traditional, more symbolic of the past. But there's nothing traditional about what's going on here. In a backyard shed, Shiga and his wife spray parts for hi-fi equipment. Or rather, their robot does. Like Eguchi the golfer, they lease a robot from the Japan Robot Leasing Company. Instead of giant factories, we're beginning to use the new tools in our own backyards. The technologies of tomorrow, added
to the traditions of yesterday. The old machines made us uniform. The new machines can make us more individual, more human. But changes in lifestyle go beyond the workplace. The third wave increases individual choice, even in terms of family life.
In 1927, when this couple were married, they assumed it was for life. They lived in a world in which fathers went out to work in factories or offices, if they were lucky enough to have a job. And mothers, by and large, stayed home to take care of their children. That's how it was for this couple, my own mother and father.
Here at this wedding, John McDonald is marrying Raylene Kuzik. Both are divorced. Each has children from a previous marriage. A new type of aggregate family is emerging in millions of homes as children from successive marriages are drawn together into complex new relationships. Charles Fechteau is an architect in Paris. He shares custody of his son Raphael with his ex-wife Nadia. Fechteau presently lives with another woman who recently gave birth to Fechteau's second child, a daughter. Phil and Irene Pullen have been married for several years and have decided to remain childless. They believe that no one type of family is right for everyone. Fred Calder is a firefighter in Toronto, a single parent raising his children, Linda and James. Marjorie Wallace is a journalist who has written noteworthy books about children. She lives with her own children in England. Her husband lives and works in Canada. First wave family, large, several generations living together under the same roof and working together as a production team in the fields or in the cottages. Second wave family, small. Father goes out to work, mother by and large stays at home to care for the children. In all second wave societies, that became the norm, the dominant family form. Today, in Canada, in the Soviet Union, in Britain, in the United States, in Sweden, in France, in country after country, we see that second wave family system beginning to break down. High divorce rates, remarriage, new conditions are replacing the second wave family with a variety of family forms. And once more, the key to understanding the third wave is diversity. In North America, where the electronic media of the third wave are most developed, new technologies, from satellite to cable television, are opening up a great diversity of program choices. Like work and family life, the media are providing new options for the individual.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The communist East, and in the capitalist West as well, the second wave created conformity. The mass media pumped symbols into our skulls. This image of Lenin is stamped into millions of minds throughout the communist world. It is instantly recognizable, almost a religious icon. If we could X-ray the second wave mind, we would find mass media images implanted there. And not just Lenin. Political propaganda was just one of the ways the mass media produced conformity in many countries. Advertising, too, sent identical images into millions of heads at the same time.
sensual, absolutely irresistible. New extra strength kiss. Exciting.
Homemade.
Yeah.
Today,
Elegant.
the entire media system
Absolutely irresistible.
is in upheaval.
New extra strength.
Third wave media are challenging the monopoly of second wave broadcasters. Cable, direct broadcast satellite, pay television, cassettes, discs, all splinter the mass audience. We are demassifying the mass media. Some of the new media are interactive. They make it possible for the audience to register its views and its votes on everything from consumer issues to politics. In fact, the new communications media could help broaden political democracy. A new human diversity is emerging from the old mass society. We're seeing increased individuality. Powerful changes are leading us away from the old smokestack society of the second wave. This is the great Buddha at Kamakura, a place for reflection on time and change, on oneness and diversity. It calls to mind a small Japanese carving I once saw and the story I heard that came with it. It had to do with two men. One had very short arms and long legs. And the other fellow, he had long arms and short legs. Individually, neither one could cope. But one day, these two fellows met up. They formed a team. And from that point on, they became unbeatable. They could run faster, they could reach further, they could do all kinds of things no one else could do. I tell this story because diversity and cooperation are the very basis of the new civilization. It would be a mistake to try and turn back to the old mass society, for we are already in motion, borne along by history's third and greatest wave of change. It is so monumental, so fast-moving, yet so close. We've only begun to glimpse its outlines and to feel its impact. We are living through an accelerating technological revolution. Here behind me in a test chamber stands a communication satellite. For many, it is the symbol of the future racing tortoise. Yet this gold and silver bird is only part of an expanding family of new tools for the human race. As we fill the heavens with satellites, we are planting the seeds of a dramatically different future. Our new civilization, with its growing diversity of values, work arrangements, and lifestyles, requires new technologies, and especially new forms of communication. For the third wave roaring toward us is critically dependent on that most intangible of resources, information. Propelled through lasers and fiber optics, pulsing through new video links, computerized telephones, and especially satellites. Satellites make distance unimportant. Far more than the mass societies of the past, our diverse new civilization requires data to define our differences and glue us back together. All of these technologies are coming together, connecting every human being with every other. We are creating a new nervous system for the planet. keeping pace with communication is the computer, which stores and manipulates information. The computer provides an additional memory system for the human race to plug into the emerging neural network. Second wave computers were big, costly, and run by experts. Some still are. By contrast, today's third wave computers are small, cheap, and decentralized. They put power into the hands of ordinary people, even children. The computer has such powerful effects on society. Its development has been compared to the invention of writing.
We are enhancing the natural intelligence of the human race. These children will also make use of artificial intelligence. Computers can respond to speech. They can display multiple windows of information, communicate with one another, and talk to us, all at the same time. Computers are converging with communications. It's increasingly hard to tell where one leaves off and the other begins.
Such changes go beyond technology. They begin to alter the very way we experience the world. These children at Macomber Farm in Massachusetts are perceiving the world the way a horse might. Their imagination is stretched. Video disc and computers help us model reality in fresh ways.
Two examples of Beethoven's music follow. The segment from the Fifth Symphony begins with what are undoubtedly the most famous four notes in music.
New encyclopedias on video disc. Instant, random access to all sorts of information. Famous Sears Roebuck catalog, hundreds of pages, now reduced to electronic memory.
Yeah, let's go back and look at that.
Okay.
Turning pages at the touch of a button. Even new kinds of maps. Not a guide, but an experience.
Aspen City Hall.
Point to a spot in Aspen, Colorado, for example, and you're there. Street by street, house by house.
I feel for visiting Aspen.
We used to think of the office as a paper factory, but now a third wave office is taking shape. Word processors are fast replacing typewriters. Optical scanners replace our eyes. They read documents for us and feed them directly into computer memories. Electronic mail systems,
Local area data networks, all are revolutionizing the traditional office. Linked to cables or satellites, they form part of a worldwide information net.
Such changes blur the roles of secretaries and executives. They threaten some workers with unemployment, even as others find their jobs upgraded. The former secretary may lose her job. Then again, she may become an executive. In fact, all our old notions about business and money itself are now being challenged, turned upside down. We used to think of money as paper or currency. Today, we are creating electronic money. Banks transfer billions across the globe daily. merely by sending electronic pulses. Take the SWIFT system, for example.
Now more and more we are able to exchange information through electronic means.
Jean-Claude Monnier is a senior official of the National Bank of Paris.
SWIFT is an international network which links 1,000 banks in the world within 32 countries. It's a network which allows these banks to exchange information related to foreign payments, customer transfers, bank transfers. All the currency movements in the world will be passed in the future through SWIFT. The next steps in the bank will be teller machines, which will allow the clerks to discuss with the customer the information stored in the computer. The further step will be for individuals to make inquiries on their account positions from home, on the TV sets.
Third wave technology affects our lives from head to foot, from education to shopping, from banking to fashion.
At the Portopia Exposition in Kobe, Japan, we see how the individual consumers of tomorrow may design their own clothing. Today, we buy mass-manufactured clothing designed by others. Tomorrow, we may feed our personal dimensions and tastes through a camera to operate computerized machines that cut clothes to our own designs. Diversity in place of uniformity. We see a return to custom tailoring, but now on a high technology basis. Today, a photograph. In the near future, the technology may provide the dress itself. Past and future converge once more.
Dramatic as they are, however, these third wave advances in space, in communications, in artificial intelligence, all seem small compared with what is simultaneously taking place in an entirely different field, genetics.
By splicing together genes from different organisms, scientists are searching for cures for cancer, genetic defects, and other diseases. Their work also promises to radically improve the world food supply. Here at the International Plant Research Institute, scientists are using advanced cell fusion and recombinant DNA techniques to create plants with astonishing new characteristics. Plants that thrive in desert sand and can be irrigated with seawater. Cereals that withstand heat and frost. Potatoes, barley, rice, corn, and cassava with remarkable nutritional properties.
Farmers have crossbred crops for thousands of years, but they couldn't cross species. Today, all sorts of new combinations and cross species are possible. And instead of centuries or years, they can be produced at an accelerated rate. Here, for example, is a potato. And here, cells drawn from a potato plant. Here we have cells taken from algae in the sea. The potato, high in starch. The algae, high in protein. Put them together, and someday, who knows, we may find ourselves with a new food called a potalgae, with improved protein content and even the ability to suck fertilizer from the air itself.
Third wave technologies, from genetic engineering to satellites, from computers and microchips to ecosystem farming. Vegetables and fish, for example, in an energy exchange. ocean sciences, all these are interrelated. And they're different from the heavy mechanical tools of the second wave era. They are an elegant new evolutionary species. They add up to a radically changed technological base, with a third wave civilization now taking shape around the globe. The third wave holds out hope for millions who have never even felt the second wave of change. In the past, many believed that all first wave countries needed centralized industrial technologies to feed their people. Others insisted that only small-scale, cheap technologies were appropriate for poor countries. Today, the third wave opens fresh possibilities, new combinations of past and future. In Las Gaviotas, Colombia, an entire range of new farming and energy devices are used. Simple but sophisticated machines designed with the aid of computers. Backyard robots, photovoltaic cells, cheap computers, genetically assisted farming. All these third wave tools may soon provide new means for decentralized development. There is no simple technological fix for poverty, but the government of China has already set up a nationwide study of third wave development. The Industrial Revolution raised living standards in many nations, but it also brought heavy pollution, heavy use of energy, and damage to the environment. Second wave technologies could endanger the ecology of the planet. Fortunately, many third wave technologies use less energy and create less damage. A striking example is the Shinai Toku Maru, one of the most remarkable ships in the world. It combines the ancient technology of the sail with the advanced technologies of today. Sensing devices measure the wind. A computer calculates its force and direction. The sails are adjusted to take maximum advantage of wind power in order to supplement the conventional engines. In energy, just as in other fields, the third wave opens many new options.
The Shinai Toku Maru burns half, often less than half, the energy required by comparable conventional vessels. But this is only one example of the new diversity of energy forms becoming available to us today.
The sun. Around the world, people are finding new, practical ways to use solar energy. These men and women seem to be engaged in traditional agriculture. Yet on these 10 acres outside New Delhi in India, they produce far more impressive food yields than traditional agriculture allows. This is in fact a solar farm created by an electronics engineer and businessman named Jagdish Kapoor. Solar collectors provide nearly all the energy for light, heat, and cooking. A computer links them to a biogas system. Yesterday and tomorrow combined once more. Elsewhere, solar furnaces melt metals and generate electric power. Photovoltaic cells turn sunlight directly into electricity. Wave power, geothermal, energy from the heat of the Earth itself. Wind generators, small, decentralized energy systems. All of these are coming into use. Someday, fusion power, as limitless as the sun or the stars themselves. Sun, sea, wind will eventually provide the diversity of energy forms needed for the new civilization. The new technologies are not without hazard. For example, some fear genetic engineering may be used for sinister political or even military purposes. There are also new forms of pollution, like electronic smog. Equally real is the danger that computers, the new two-way communication systems and other technologies will be used to undermine our personal liberties.
Your identity has been verified. Please dial your condition code. Thank you.
Governments themselves frequently misuse computers, invading our privacy to control our behavior. There are men in every government, in every society, who would be perfectly happy to turn George Orwell's 1984 into a reality. At least as important as technological hazards or the threat to our liberties is the specter of unemployment. For 5 years, I was a blue-collar worker in steel foundries, automobile plants, and other factories in the American Midwest. I was a millwright and a metal finisher, an assembly line worker and a welder. This foundry, with its unforgettable smell of hot sand, the hiss of air, the rattle of chains, the black grit, calls to mind the faces of the men and women I worked with then. Today, many industries are being forced to change or die. As the third wave sweeps in, factories and foundries that prospered for generations become no more than relics of the past. The economically advanced nations cannot compete against cheap labor in the world market. Industries like textile, auto, and steel are phasing out old factories and racing to install third-wave technology. But automated plants, mini-mills, robots, and computer controls mean fewer jobs for workers like these. Whole economies are being restructured around information, services, and advanced manufacture as the old second-wave industries run down. This forces us to ask hard questions. What retraining is available for these workers? Can jobs be multiplied indefinitely? Will the work week have to be cut? Must governments provide a minimum income for all citizens? Such problems cry out for new solutions that go beyond today's debates about the free market, the welfare state, or the centrally planned economy. The basic industries of the second wave will never be basic again. Many countries, even the richest, will have to face the most far-reaching social and economic questions they have ever known. Many traditional manufacturing industries are now shifting across the planet to poorer countries. In nation after nation, vast upheavals. Millions without work, without hope. And not only workers, managers too. In the high technology countries, what is passing away are not merely old industries, but a way of life. The blue-collar, white-collar mass society of the second wave era. At the time of the Industrial Revolution, when the second wave arrived, workers tried to protect themselves by destroying the new machines. In this pub, outside Halifax, England, linger the ghosts of those desperate and hungry men.
It was here in 1811 that Ned Ludd, leader of the so-called Luddites, conspired with his men to destroy the new technologies they blamed for unemployment. Ludd and his men smashed the textile spinning frames. They tried to hold back the second wave. But in the end, it was they themselves who were smashed. And virtually all that remains of them is the solitude in this tiny tavern.
Yet the questions raised by the Luddites have come to haunt us again. Can we continue forever to provide regular full-time work for all? If whole industries die, who should suffer the costs of dislocation? Workers? Managers? Government? Are we creating a permanent class of left-out people, trapped in the past, excluded from the future? But even as we wonder what to do about the dying second-wave industries, a whole new breed of third-wave industries are cropping up. For some industries, too many workers. For others, not enough. How do we turn crisis into opportunity? Not for the few, but for the many. Old ideas no longer work. The third wave challenges all our conventional ideologies. And yet, nothing could be more dangerous or foolish than despair. Or even as a second wave civilization disintegrates around us, we're creating a new civilization, a new way of life, filled not just with problems, but also with fantastic opportunities for ourselves and our children. The time has come to prepare ourselves for that new way of life. The great cathedral at Chartres. Whatever else the church may have been, it was a product of human imagination. And just as our ancestors created machines, they also created institutions and buildings to symbolize them. In fact, all the institutions we take for granted today, churches, factories, schools, governments, were all inventions. Invented by human beings just like you and me. Successive age creates new institutions, unimaginable for the people of the past. However much we value old institutions, we cannot expect them to solve all our problems. What the world now needs desperately are new ways of working and living together, institutions for a third wave civilization. Civilization, we're told, began in ancient Mesopotamia in a region called the Fertile Crescent. Here, 30 or 40 miles south of San Francisco, lies Silicon Valley, California. And some of its inhabitants think that it may well be the Fertile Crescent of tomorrow's civilization. Here, computer firms, chip manufacturers, software designers jostle each other next door to genetic engineering laboratories and agricultural research centers. These are the new, the third wave industries, and in them, the future of work is unfolding. These men are working. They're employees of the Rome Corporation, and they're typical of the emerging third wave labor force.
Really low-cost basic instrument.
They spend their hours thinking, counting, reading, talking, applying imagination to problems. There is more and more design work, and there's less and less assembly work. What there is requires skill. At Tandem Computers, all employees are invited to a Friday afternoon beer bash. The party, however, is more than social. People exchange ideas. The lines are blurring between blue collar and white collar. Jim Trybig is president of Tandem Computers, many of whose employees feel they're on a frontier where success depends on creativity.
Helps people to do better.
You can take this one person that's very creative and put them in that company and they're stamped or deviant because they think different. They don't want to fit in some mold. Or that group of people doesn't tolerate failures. And to be creative, 9 ideas out of 10 are going to be wrong. So it must be a structure of people, a group of people that likes different ideas, realizes that 9 out of 10 are going to be wrong, and doesn't punish the person for that. That same person in a different environment stamped a hero. And so a brilliant person with new ideas or good ideas in one place is rejected and in the other place loved. And one of the key roles of management is to encourage and to reward people that are creative. And in fact, sometimes they must be creative themselves to set an example. What you're describing is very different from my own experience. When I worked on the auto assembly line or in a steel foundry, we cordially disliked, often hated, the men who came through in white shirts and clipboards. We wore blue denim. They wore dress shoes. We wore steel safety shoes. They gave orders. We took them. Recently, I spent the morning with the chairman of the board of another Silicon Valley company, rather like this one. This company's done extremely well in recent years. It's shot up and now has annual sales of about $400 million a year. This time, I wore a shirt and tie. He wore a T-shirt. I was in a business suit. He was wearing jeans. I wore dress shoes. And he was barefoot. He was hardly 30 years old. And he said to me that to hire a top-notch engineer nowadays in Silicon Valley takes a lot more than just money.
What time are you supposed to go back there on Friday?
Steve Balter runs an executive placement service for high-technology companies. Employers search for good people. They offer a wide array of inducements. They offer educational opportunities, paid sabbaticals, and workplaces designed to cultivate individual talent. High-technology communities like Silicon Valley are fast multiplying.
Okay, let me tell you what
Texas, Florida, California and Connecticut, in Massachusetts and Minnesota. Around the world, too, in Canada, Europe, and Asia.
I used to work on some new
He had a bipolar LSI project.
for a development system.
Terrific MOS LSI for the UAC.
There are a lot of electronics companies you could work for. But only one.
Competition is so fierce that third-wave companies are turning to television to help them find the right person.
It's not the easiest place to work. Just the best.
Companies are inviting people to join the future.
And catch the wave.
Purpose, challenge, a stimulating environment. This place looks like a health spa. It is, in fact, part of the facilities of a telecommunications company. The old ethic assumed that work had to be painful. The new ethic reverses that. Many of these companies think playing hard actually contributes to thinking hard. The institution of work itself is changing. Second-wave companies think of machines and buildings as assets. They think of people as expenses. Third-wave companies think of machines and buildings as expenses. People are their most important asset. Creative people are the biggest asset of all. That's the secret of the new civilization. Home. The word calls up images of the past. A man's home is his castle. Home, sweet home. The culture is filled with songs and sayings that glorify the home as the individual's ultimate haven in a world of hunger and haste. Nowhere was this attitude more pronounced than in the homes of the Victorian age. And yet, at the very time that the culture was most glorifying the home, the second wave was tearing it apart. It took work out of the home and put it into the factory, the office. Today, work is coming home again. Paul Lutis likes privacy. He likes the outdoors. But he also values contact with the world. Outside his cottage in the Oregon mountains is a satellite receiver dish. Inside, he writes and sells computer programs. For him, home is an electronic cottage.
This cabin is a brain factory in the wilderness. It's where I think, and thinking is my product.
Paul Lutis is not alone. Meet Emily Klipstein and her family. Emily designs educational materials.
I really do enjoy working at home because I do get a lot done. My productivity really goes up, and I don't have to drive that commute.
In Arizona, Lou Reed also works at home as a programmer for a large corporation.
I like working from home. It kind of saves a lot of time. And when I work 8 hours for a day, that's all I work. I don't have to worry about travel time or anything like that. The computer's given me a chance to work again, to become productive. I think that I can compete with anybody else that's working with computers.
Yasuo Nagazumi works for both the automobile industry and the fashion industry in Japan. Because of cheap computers and telecommunications, people are designing buildings and cars, typing memos and letters, writing reports, all at home. Whole families families may work together again. Nothing will ever replace person-to-person contact, but we may go to the office 2 days and stay home 3. Many patterns are possible. All second-wave economies are in trouble, yet nothing is more wasteful than making people commute to jobs that deny their creativity. The electronic cottage and the new work styles promise new economic power and a freer, more flexible life. We are building new institutions for a third-wave civilization. But will all of us benefit? The third wave imposes fundamental changes on the economy in many nations simultaneously. It raises the risk of social upheaval. It poses heated controversies over the marketplace, planning, and personal freedom. Yet one thing is clear. Millions of us will need new skills on the job and in the home, retraining for an entirely new way of life. Yet, for most workers, appropriate training opportunities are still scarce or simply unavailable. Here in South Carolina, the state government has made a start.
What I'd like to do is talk a little bit about Program 5.
Preparing people for the industries of the future.
Some of you have been trying to either read past the end of one of your files, either your transaction file.
I went to Piedmont Tech and took a 2-year course in data processing, which included programming, financial management, and business law, and all those sort of things.
Frances Fitzpatrick used to be a religious educator. Today, she's a systems analyst for Westinghouse Corporation.
Working with computers offers elderly people a new opportunity because it makes use of their mental abilities. They do not have to have the physical strength to do these jobs. People often say that you can't teach old dogs new tricks, but then I tell them I'm not a dog and I can learn.
I'll talk to Walt and see what's going on as far as...
For Scott Wellington at Tandem Computers in California, the third wave has brought surprising changes.
I worked part-time all my life, really. I was a dishwasher for a while. I worked as a janitor. The last job I had before I came out here was in a Mercedes-Benz dealer, jockeying cars up and down the East Coast. If I had thought that I'd be doing what I'm doing now 3 years ago, I would have laughed because it just didn't enter into my mind. I didn't think there was that many avenues up to a somewhat technical job that I'm doing now. But now that I see it and I see the avenues and the amount of people that are also going the same direction that I am, there's a lot of opportunity out there, especially in the computer industry.
Kyushu, Japan. Once jobless or employed in other industries, these people are part of a unique government training program that prepares them for tomorrow. There are more opportunities in the new fields than many of us suspect, but they require retraining, and the need for that is global. We are all handicapped if all we have are yesterday's skills. If adults need to learn new life skills, what about our children? Second wave schools did a good job of preparing kids for a life in factories and offices. Here, for example, we see children learning how to commute. In classrooms, they become accustomed to rote and repetitive work. But are these the skills they will need in a third wave world? Rather than going back to basics, we need to go forward to new basics. We need to change all our educational assumptions, even the role of the school itself. Tomorrow, for many, the third wave may put education back into the home, right along with work. Anna Myers is one of many parents today who keep their children out of school, teaching them at home instead. But homeschooling is only one of many alternatives to the increasingly obsolete schools of today. Lots of young people will no doubt continue to go to school, but education must change. We must link education to the freer work ethic of tomorrow. We must break the standardization of the second wave school.
The computer can help. It is not a machine for repetitive drill. Used imaginatively, whether in classroom or kitchen, it is an ideal tool for custom tailoring education to each child's needs. Instead of second wave uniformity, it helps achieve the ultimate in diversity, individualization. We need to reinvent all of education, even the idea of literacy.
How literate is a child who cannot recognize distortions or propaganda on television or in the other media? How literate is a child who knows nothing about computers? In fact, some people today are already beginning to speak of tri-literacy. Print literacy, media literacy, and computer literacy. The third wave will need workers, and not just a small elite. And they will have to be adaptive, questioning, creative. Some people would like the schools to go backward. They would like schools like the ones they attended 20 or 40 years ago. Yet the world is changing swiftly, and we may very well cheat our children if we continue to educate them for yesterday's second wave civilization instead of the third wave civilization of tomorrow. Our days are filled with
inflation
and
the
politics,
growing tax burden.
not just work and education, will have to be reinvented if we are to survive. If governments don't cope with the third wave, they will face increasingly violent protests, unemployment, inflation, terrorism, and the dangers of war. What do we do? A lot of people would like some messiah to come along and solve all our problems for us. But other people, in other crises, have turned to great leaders to do their thinking for them. And the result, often as not, has been disaster, tyranny, or Holocaust. If our political institutions aren't working, it may not be because of our leaders. Even if we had saints and geniuses on top, the system couldn't work. Because the problem isn't people. The problem is the system itself. Second wave governments cannot govern an increasingly third wave world. But that's exactly what we do in politics. We still make laws the way our grandfathers did. Today's governments, capitalist and communist alike, were never designed to operate in a world of computers and satellites and
high-speed, world-shaking change. In fact, our governments are obsolete. Our political institutions are overloaded. They're blowing their fuses. And unless we begin to apply as much imagination to politics as we do to technology, communications, many other fields, the collision between second wave and third wave is likely to become even more intense and potentially dangerous. Fortunately, new political tools are on the horizon. Computers, interactive television, electronic voting. But the essential problems are not technological, and electronics alone cannot solve our problems. What are needed are new ideas. The coming of the third wave forces us to question all of our deepest assumptions about democracy. What is the meaning of majority rule in a demassified society made up of so many diverse groups? What new methods can we use to mediate conflicts and prevent violence? Are all our constitutions out of date? And in an age of computers and electronics and genetic engineering, don't we need to expand our conception of human rights? Is parliamentary democracy itself, the whole idea of electing others to represent us, still viable? Or do we need direct democracy as well? No one can be sure what kind of government will work best for us under the new conditions of the third wave. But some truths are evident. The third wave civilization is made up of minorities. In fact, in this new society, all of us are members of minority groups. We need to protect the rights of minorities, to increase, not decrease, their voice in government. We need to put more decisions down at the local level, the grassroots. But the third wave is also global. We may need new global institutions to deal with energy, ecology, resources, communications, outer space. We are already on the moon. Our spacecraft circle the planets. Yet our political parties are still fighting to preserve the mass society, the second wave civilization of yesterday. If we look back, we find that our ancestors invented all the political apparatus we still use today. Bureaucracies, parties, parliaments, presidencies, prime ministerships. They created the entire system, but for a distant age. We are light years from our origins, and now the time has come again, a revolutionary moment in human history, when we will have to be as creative as our ancestors were. As the new civilization arrives, we will have to use imagination to invent new political forms for tomorrow. An expanded democracy fit for the 21st century. The surprising message of the third wave is that as the affluent nations move into this new age, they become more like first wave nations, but on a high technology basis.
And the first wave nations may be able to feed their millions without undergoing the agony of a traditional industrial revolution. It may be possible to combine the computer and the hoe, the satellite and the soil, the microchip and the mind. The third wave brings the end of mass society and a rich new human diversity. And despite difficulties of transition, it holds out promise, not merely for the strong and the rich, but for the vast majority of the human race from one end of the earth to the other. We are all together now, at the starting point. We are the children of the third wave of history.
The Third Wave, a book by Alvin Toffler, is available in paperback at bookstores and libraries throughout the United States.